The 3-minute thesis competition celebrates research conducted by PhD students around the world and was developed by the University of Queensland in 2008. Competitors have to explain their research in just 3 minutes to a non-specialist audience, and they're only allowed one PowerPoint slide, they're allowed no props and no other resources. The competition is held in over 400 institutions across 6 different continents, and this year, for the very first time, 4 of Singapore's universities took part at national level. And we're delighted to tell you that we have here today Singapore's 3-minute thesis competition winner, Brandon, from the Singapore Management University, the first runner-up, Venkatraman, from Nanyang Technological University, and the second runner-up, Alisha, from the National University of Singapore. So we're now going to listen to them. Please welcome to the stage, and we start with Alisha. Thank you.
Let me ask you all a riddle. Not everyone has me. I'm gender biased. There are more than 2 billion pairs of me in this world. I nurture and I nourish, but I can also kill. Who am I? The answer is breast. Yes, breasts nurture and feed infants, but at the same time, breasts take lives of 50,000 women every year. Why should this number concern us? Well, look around you. More than half of you in this room are women. Does that leave the men aside? Not really. Even men are at risk, as every year 3,000 males are diagnosed with breast cancer. My study involves a protein called WBP2. I observe that normal breast cells have a low expression, that is, a less amount of this protein. But if the amount of WBP2 increases, then it acts on normal cells, causing them to constantly divide, migrate, invade, all of which are cancer hallmarks. So WBP2 is a breast cancer causing beast, and hence it is important to keep its expression in check. In order to do so, we must all know the recipe of protein formation. In all your bodies, your DNA has the recipe to form proteins. This recipe is read by chefs called transcription factors, who put together all ingredients to form RNA. This RNA is then seasoned to create the main dish, proteins. For me to control WBP2 protein expression, I must control the very first step of its formation, that is performed by the master chefs, transcription factors. I successfully identified a transcription factor that converts the WBP2 DNA to its RNA. And I realized that if I manipulate this transcription factor, I can actually control WBP2 protein expression. One of the most exciting findings of my study is that if I inhibit the transcription factor, WBP2 doesn't show its cancer hallmarks. To me, transcription factors are like a switch. They can turn the cancer protein on or off, and hence can be promising therapeutic targets. Most of us out here see cancer as a hopeless end, but I hope that my research will open doors for us towards endless hope, and that breasts can continue to be a giver of life rather than a taker of one. Thank you.
It's a beautiful world we live in, a world of brilliant colors, glorious sunsets, fairy tale rainbows, pristine beaches, clear blue seas. But not all of us appreciate them. Some of us are too busy, others too preoccupied. But some, well, they just can't, because every 5 seconds, one person loses his sight somewhere in the world. Every day, one child goes blind. The cornea is the transparent front part of the eye that helps us to see clearly. Corneal dystrophy is a genetically inherited disease that affects the cornea. The mutation in the gene produces a protein which is prone to aggregation and is deposited in the cornea. And as the protein deposit builds up, the cornea becomes opaque, as you can see from the picture here, and the person loses his sight. What happens once a person loses his sight? His quality of life is lost. He becomes so dependent on others, even for his day-to-day activities. He becomes a burden to the nation's healthcare system. And reports say that these numbers are set to double in the next 3 decades. And as a researcher, what am I going to do to help these patients see a better world? In my PhD, I've taken a 4-way approach to tackle corneal dystrophies. The first is to screen family members of patients who might also be at risk of the disease. We developed a simple but robust tool and a genetic analysis to help identify the mutations in the family members. The second is to understand the disease mechanism better. I collected the affected corneas from patients when they underwent a corneal transplantation surgery. I analyzed the protein composition of these deposits and linked them back to possible disease-causing aggregation pathways. The third is a very fulfilling personal favorite, a drug discovery approach. I screened about 2,500 compounds and identified 3 lead compounds that could prevent these protein aggregation. The last is to have models to test our lead compounds on. Unfortunately, animal models mimicking the disease is not available yet. So we work on in vitro protein and peptide aggregation models to test our compounds. So, friends, please do not take your gift of sight for granted. So there are so many people who cannot appreciate the beauty of the world. So please take a minute to enjoy the beauty, appreciate the smile in the faces of your loved ones. Stand a minute to take an awe of the rainbow which others take for granted. Feast your eyes on the butterfly, its colors, the gossamer wings, and the powdery snow, because it's a beautiful world we live in. Thank you.
Have you ever imagined what the future will look like 50 years from now? What will change? Will we progress? And more importantly, how can we design for a better future? In my research, I examine how thinking about the future can enhance our creativity. Now, creativity is about creating ideas that are both original and useful. Unfortunately, truly original ideas are actually very rare. And one reason is because we tend to rely on our schemas to produce new ideas. Now, a schema is our stereotypical and preconceived mental model of the world. It helps us to think quickly in everyday situations, but has a strong negative impact on creativity. For example, if you ask people to produce you creative designs of an alien movie character, and you tell them that this alien character has feathers, most people would tend to also think about wings quite automatically, much like typical birds. And so schemas can constrain the originality of our ideas. But how then can we alter people's schema of the world if we wanted to promote more creativity? I discovered that when people think about the future, they automatically envision high levels of change and progress in future societies. They see the world as radically different, and so momentarily, their mental model of the world becomes shifted. In 3 experiments, I had participants write short essays about human life either in the future or the present day before they engage in tasks having them to design creative new products. In my first study, participants who thought about the future before designing toys produced more original-looking toys. In my second study, I further found that the more change and progress that they envisioned in the future, the more creative were their dining table designs. Now, this was a really difficult task because people tend to have strong schemas about dining tables. It has a flat surface, legs, typically round, rectangular, or some symmetrical design. And so this gives us another way to evaluate the extent that they have broken free from their schematic thinking. Finally, in my third study, I had participants tell me about the future, why the future might be radically different, whereas another group tell me how the future will remain fundamentally similar. And only when they saw the future as radically different were they more creative at designing new movie characters. But more importantly, we also investigated the strategy they took to design these characters. And we found that those who saw the future as radically different were more likely to create new ideas from scratch rather than attempt to modify existing ones. Now, this is a strategy that strongly predisposes originality. All in all, my research suggests that we should spend more time contemplating what the future might bring, because our hope for change and progress in the future not only inspires more creativity, but prepare us to take an innovative posture that embraces that change. Thank you.